I reject the premise. I would love to, like, I'm not right now because I'm too angry, but see, you and I need to get into a VC with Pokri.
I'm barely involved in this, and it makes me personally fucking
Give
angry.
him
That is
the
a
fear
disgusting, irresponsible thing to do.
Put the fear of God.
Oh, one more time.
Put the fear of God into him.
Hello everyone. I know that this is not the video that everyone was expecting to see for my return, but I already had videos I was working on that I was planning on uploading very soon, so I figured I might as well get this one out the way because this is actually a very important matter. And I am not someone who usually makes drama content, as you can see from my channel, but given that the person we will be talking about today is a pretty prominent figure, or was a pretty prominent figure, at least in the communities that I occupy, I figured that this situation was worth bringing to light on my channel. But I am getting ahead of myself. Who is the person in question? Well, today I want to talk about a YouTuber you may or may not know who goes by the name of Southpaw, a former member of EFAP who I found out about through his connections to people like Sheev Talks, Madvocate, and SK.
The unholy fucking trinity.
Sheev and Madvocate being two YouTubers I respect and watch moderately, and SK being someone who is a close friend of mine. And upon my first meeting with Southpaw, I learned some pretty damning information. See, Southpaw is apparently 30 years old. Now, personally, I think being 30 years old is enough for scrutiny already.
Go home to your family, dude.
But see, when Southpaw was 20 years old, he was engaged in a romantic relationship with a 16-year-old. And I don't think I should have to explain the moral wrongdoings of a grown-ass man dating a high schooler. Now, after I learned this information about Southpaw, I did voice to SK and many others in the community that I was friends with that I just personally don't understand why we kept Southpaw around. But I was told by multiple people that Southpaw had condemned his actions from the past and put in the work to change and grow over the last 10 years. However, as we are about to go over, that is bullshit. Now, the context for why this drama even began in the first place is silly looking back on it and just not that big of a deal. However, due to its relevance to the overall situation, I will go over it briefly because this was my first ever interaction with Southpaw, and it was a discussion that he wanted to have over a Sheev Talks tweet, where in the tweet, if you ask me, it is very clearly Sheev Talks implying that comic books are a dog shit medium. Obviously, if you want to hold that opinion, all power to you. I don't have an issue with that. However, Southpaw had an issue with the fact that people like SK were holding Sheev accountable for this statement, given that it's belittling an entire medium. So basically, Southpaw is in a VC discussing with me about whether or not Sheev was actually dismissing the medium. Everyone in the VC agreed that Southpaw pretty much lost the discussion, and he conceded for the time being that us having the interpretation we had was not us being dishonest or disingenuous. Because, and I'm just gonna put this bluntly, this wasn't a situation that was all that deep. Who really gives a fuck? But the important part here is that at the end of this conversation, SK and his friend Comic Legend, who Southpaw was having beef with over this tweet as well, both got him and his idiotic associate, the media detective, yes, that is someone's actual name on the internet, to essentially agree on holding off on making jabs at someone's character, especially when they don't have full context, because Southpaw was going all over Twitter calling Comic Legend dishonest, disingenuous, and extending those sentiments towards people like SK as well. And I once again want to reiterate, this was over a situation that was not serious. So I want the people listening to this to really consider what 30-year-old would react this way over a conversation about a fucking tweet about comic books. Now that we have that context out of the way, I did move on from that situation wanting to forget about it. As I pointed out earlier, I am already someone who's uncomfortable around Southpaw to begin with, given his past actions that I'm aware of. So imagine my surprise to see the 30-year-old man-child mentioning my name, saying I ran away scared from him over a Twitter conversation that I I forgot about. Have I mentioned that he's 30?
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
And the worst part is the context is him arguing with two people I consider friends and being just overall really fucking annoying and rude over, once again, a conversation about comic books. So me being A, someone who's already annoyed by the situation, B, someone who already doesn't like Southpaw, and C, someone who's watching him disrespect people I am cool with, I decided to post a tweet where I said, I have no idea why you are this confident talking hot like this as if you don't have a documented history of being an EDP. Because truth be told, these people have been doing you a favor for years by not cutting you off or just simply not spreading more awareness to your history. Now, I will take accountability and acknowledge that I definitely escalated the situation. However, in hindsight, I don't regret escalating it at all. Because of this tweet, Southpaw wanted to get in a VC with me and essentially just discuss the implications of my tweet and whether or not he is an EDP. When one thing should be made very clear, I didn't accuse Southpaw of anything in that tweet. I simply pointed out that he has a past of doing something. However, as I'm going to explain, Southpaw goes on to argue that 20 and 16 is not pedophilic. There literally just isn't. I said you have a documented history of this thing. Do you disagree or agree that you have a history of what I accuse you of?
Of being a pedophile?
Of dating a 16-year-old when you're 20, yes.
You said I have a documented history of being a pedophile.
Well, yes, I would call that being a pedophile. We can get into whether or not that's pedophilia.
Well, then your definition is wrong.
And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of bad arguments that he makes during our debate that we had, but I mainly wanted to go over the ones that lead to really incriminating conclusions. For one, he argued that he wasn't a mature 20-year-old, so it wouldn't be pedophilic. But even if we ignore the fact that an adult being less mature than their peers is not a reason for them to fuck a high schooler, the argument falls apart completely because when asked for examples of how he's immature, the only thing Southpaw provided was that he was homophobic and had the typical views of a conservative Christian because of his household at the time. So under this framework, it is permissible to Southpaw to engage in romantic activities with a teenager or child when you're 20, as long as you are homophobic or a conservative Christian. Because at that point you're 20. People are expecting you to like move out the house, like get a decent paying job, like buy a car, yada. Like you're expected to do a bunch of adult things by the time you're 20.
So it's based on what society's expectation is then, rather than anything more concrete or scientific.
It says when you're legally and socially recognized for your actions. Legally, you're an adult at 18. Legally. Socially, I think, yes, 20 would be where you're considered an adult, which is relevant to the definition because it takes into account social norms.
I still maintain that I was not a very mature 20-year-old. Listen, for a lot of, like, I think that if you're talking about someone who is going to college, is living on their own, yada yada, I can totally understand that. You were talking to someone who had very arrested development, has quite a contentious relationship with his family for a number of reasons, that being not least of them. I don't like that I was homeschooled. I don't like that I was, raised into an evangelical Christian family. I don't like that I was taught that, objectively wrong things about the age of the earth in, actual history.
I'm sorry to hear that, but I just don't see what this has to do with the conversation though. Another argument that Southpaw tries to make is that I should not be clowning him for his past because it is only public information due to Nazi propaganda.
I am
So basically, Southpaw had a falling out with someone a long time ago. This person in question, I guess, was some crazy right-winger who was making fun of a victim of SA. And at this point, I would like to address a certain part of the recording where Southpaw dumped all of this lore on me and tried to use it as some form of gotcha to show that I don't care about SA victims.
He starts monologuing.
When no, I care very much about victims of SA or predatory behavior of any kind. But the problem is when Southpaw had the falling out with this person who was essentially victim blaming the victim of SA, this person who Southpaw had entrusted very personal and sensitive information to decided to leak the screenshots of the DMs where Southpaw confessed to dating the teenager. However, the context of how these screenshots exist to begin with isn't really relevant at all. What's relevant is whether or not you dated the teenager, which you very clearly admitted to. And it's also not relevant whether or not the person who leaked this information was a terrible person or not. Because at the end of the day, we're not discussing the person, we're discussing the information. I don't even know the guy who leaked it. However, I am more than inclined to believe at this point that Southpaw himself does not care for SA victims in the slightest. Because if you ask me, standing up for someone who is a victim of that heinous crime shouldn't be something you think you deserve praise for. In my opinion, that's the bare fucking minimum. And the audacity of him to try and use that as a gotcha for brownie points in a Discord argument is very telling of his character. Because Southpaw is not a man with a moral backbone or any form of logical consistency in any way. He's a sad, depraved 30-year-old with no life who desperately craves for people on the internet to like him and show him the affection he doesn't get in real life. And this couldn't be even more obvious from how he talked about his family upbringing when talking to me. See, Southpaw was really desperate to make himself seem like a victim of the conservative Christian household, even going as far as to say that age gap relationships were normalized to him because his older brother was dating a 15-year-old when he was 19. However, a source very close to Southpaw and his family has recently confirmed that this is a lie, and I also am someone who just doesn't personally deem it as all that relevant. See, you can give all the context you want to your actions or whatever, right? But at the end of the day, all they do is explain. They don't justify your actions. I am very sorry to hear that you went through all that. However, you still dated a child when you were an adult, and no amount of defending and coping from your little friends on the internet is ever going to change that. And that covers all of the arguments that he made in his specific argument with me. However, as you can tell from the runtime, that is definitely not where this saga ends. See, after the debate, Southpaw and his little posse of dick riders were doing a lot of coping, basically trying to run with the narrative that I was somehow being obtuse and disingenuous during my discussion with Southpaw. See, during the debate, I did make the claim that I believe a PDF file can be reformed over time. With the proper care and resources, I have no reason to believe that it's just not true that that can happen. The same way that your attraction to anything can change over time with new information or just learning and growing over time due to life experience. Now, if you are given the second chance and choose to do nothing with the second chance or choose to not grow with that second chance, then yeah, I do believe it's GG's for you. So, of course, I asked Southpaw, is he still attracted to the 16-year-old, since he holds the stance that no, a PDF file can never be changed or reformed. And he made the claim no, because your attraction to children cannot change. Clearly implying a 16-year-old is not a child, but okay. And an argument that was made in a friend of mine's DMs as well as towards SK is that it's completely illogical to believe that a PDF file can be reformed or changed in any way, because if there was a way to accomplish this, then it would have been accomplished already. When, to begin with, this is inherently an argument from ignorance. You are arguing that there's no such way to reform a PDF file because there's no way you've been shown to reform a PDF file. You are literally arguing that because there's no evidence presented to you to the contrary, therefore the contrary is impossible to be considered true, which is fallacious. And it's also ignoring the decades of reports of therapy being offered to sex offenders in jail with very low rates of relapses. So clearly, yes, there is treatment that theoretically could work. And also, once again, this entire argument is implying inherently that a 16-year-old is not a child, because Southpaw himself says out of his mouth that he is not attracted to the teenager anymore. Fuck no.
Minors!
Southpaw also has a very weird standard for pedophilia to begin with. Minors! As he discusses with SK and also alluded to with me, but I didn't allow him to use it during our debate. Southpaw appeals to the DSM-5, which verbatim says that there needs to be a 5-year age gap in order for it to be considered pedophilic, which I don't think I need to explain how that's a harmful standard to hold to begin with, because that clearly establishes that 18 and 14 wouldn't be pedophilic, which is insane. But also, and I did also explain this to Southpaw during our discussion, while the DSM-5 gives a criteria for classifications of mental disorders, it shouldn't be treated as the end-all be-all for the definitions of words. At the end of the day, the dialect we use within the English language has an etymology that has been studied for years on years on years, and a dictionary, which Southpaw vehemently disagrees with using, would be a source that has studied this specific etymology and would be able to substantiate the definitions they give. However, the people creating the DSM-5 are not required by a job to study the etymology or give the exact reasons or justifications for every definition they use. They're simply giving criteria for mental disorders, not fitting the word in general. So I believe it's inherently disingenuous to try and use this as some form of definition for the term PDF file. But let's be real, he's clearly only using this because it invalidates the stance that his 4-year age gap relationship was predatory. And that would conclude the arguments that were presented as far as whether or not Southpaw was a PDF file and how harmful I find them to be. Both debates ended with basically majority of people coming away with the takeaway that Southpaw is a disingenuous weirdo, and that ultimately he doesn't belong in our community. However, as if things couldn't get any worse for Southpaw, he managed to do the unthinkable. So for about a year or two now, friend of the channel, Captain Kaba, has had a close friend of his that has been in the community, or I should say in Southpaw's community. And for the sake of privacy, we will call this friend and was sexually harassed by someone who was also in said community. For sake of privacy, because the person who committed the harassment was a minor, and I do believe that they could grow from this experience and don't deserve to be harassed, we will refer to them as Harley. So Kaba and we're talking about Southpaw and TK, the person who was defending him in the screenshots, which is when revealed to Kaba that Harley had sexually harassed her in her DMs. Now, I will put the images on the screen just for reference to show that this is something that actually happened, but obviously the actual images that were sent are blurred. Kaba proceeds to send these screenshots to TK and telling TK to handle it because this is his community. So TK spreads the screenshots around as evidence. However, what Kaba didn't know at the time of sending this to TK is that the person in the screenshot, Harley, is a minor. So unfortunately, this means that cheese pizza was being spread around. And while Kaba didn't know, TK absolutely did know and was still spreading it around uncensored. The situation was being discussed in GCs and how we will move forward was being discussed, but we were overall keeping it under wraps mostly, at least until we decided what the best steps forward would be. Until about a week later, where an argument happened in a group chat between someone known as PJ and Southpaw. And during this argument, PJ basically got onto Southpaw for allowing his friend TK to just send uncensored cheese pizza around. And this is where the actions go from Southpaw being really stupid to suddenly he's a really disturbing and deranged man. So after his argument with PJ, where PJ brings up the stuff about the cheese pizza, he leaves the group chat and proceeds to DM SK. And in the DMs, he texts SK saying, "This is the evidence. Here is the quote-unquote CP that was supposedly shared in a GC according to PJ." So one, he's putting it in quotations to minimize the idea that it's CP. We will get back to that. But also, he's sending it to SK just for the sole purpose of winning a Discord argument with PJ. SK has no dog in the fight or absolutely nothing to do with their dispute and had no stance on the matter. So yes, sending him uncensored cheese pizza in his DMs unprompted is unacceptable. Not everybody gets their dick hard to children like you, Southpaw. And as you can see from these screenshots, it took SK reiterating it to him multiple times that he doesn't want this in his DMs and doesn't want to see this for Southpaw to delete it. So yes, to summarize, Southpaw, the 30-year-old man, decides to distribute cheese pizza after his friend was already called out for doing this exact same thing, and somehow he thought this was a gotcha. Another thing to point out is that he very clearly doesn't apologize ever in these DMs to SK, when simply seeing those images were enough to stress SK enough to the point where he couldn't even sleep. And if you thought it couldn't get any worse, it absolutely can, because here is a screenshot of Southpaw after the fact discussing in a GC with TK the Freak and the dumbfuck detective that it's not even CP to begin with. And to summarize the image, because I know I haven't given an actual description of it yet, it is an image of a miner's bulge that she very much drew attention to when sending it. And yes, CP can still be classified as CP even if you are clothed in the image. Now, I do want to make one thing clear. TK has conceded at this point that he was completely in the wrong and wants nothing to do with Southpaw. Basically, there was a sit-down talk with him and he understands where he was wrong and that this image is in fact CP. However, the dumbfuck detective is still very much gurgling that Southpaw penis to the point where he's went on a blocking spree, and him and Southpaw are two people I would definitely recommend that anyone watching this should stay away from. So overall, to gather my thoughts and summarize what this whole video is about. Well, for one, I don't believe that Southpaw condemns any of his old actions that he made when he was 20. If he truly condemned it, why would he feel so compelled to constantly justify and defend it, using defenses such as he was an immature 20-year-old or that he was raised in a conservative Christian household where age gaps were normalized for him? Overall, it is just very apparent that Southpaw genuinely does not see the issue with any of the actions that he takes on the internet and has little to no regard with how his actions impact others, especially those that he considers friends in his own twisted mind. This is someone who has known SK for years on years on years, and yet for some reason it takes him telling you multiple times that he doesn't want cheese pizza in his DMs for you to finally delete it. And I genuinely think just simply seeing the images should be enough to disgust you as a grown man to the point where you wouldn't even want to spread it. If you or anyone you know is associated with Southpaw or endorses him or defends him in any way, shape, or form, I definitely would recommend just distancing yourself, because there's just nothing good that can ever come from associating with someone like this. Someone who just constantly has nothing but drama going on in his life. Because as I've reiterated multiple times in this video, he is 30 years old. He should not be on the internet acting like a teenager. With that being said, do not attack or harass anyone that was mentioned in this video. I want all of the criticism to be focused towards Southpaw, and even then I want it to be focused towards getting him the help that he needs. And Southpaw, if you are watching this, I absolutely do hope that you take the time to do some self-reflection and some soul searching. Never too late to better yourself at the end of the day. Yes, the fuck it is, bro. You are so fucking cooked, gang. Like, genuinely get the fuck off the internet and go touch grass, my nigga. Niggas gave you a whole second chance after finding out that when you were 20 years old, you had to pick your bitch up from algebra class, and you still somehow fucked it up by going around sending CP uncensored. You get absolutely zero fucking sympathy or respect for me, and you don't deserve anything in life. Genuinely, fuck you. You are a terrible piece of shit.
You're not the real heroes. I'm the real hero. I'm the real hero.
With that being said, y'all, though, anyone not named Southpaw or Media Detective, I hope you hit the gym today, make some money, be productive, twin. I love you. Also, new videos soon.